Under the resolute leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is not merely planning a city, it is signaling the end of Western dominance and the rise of African sovereignty. The Renaissance city is more than just bricks and mortar. It is a revolution, a giant middle finger to the West, a declaration that Africa doesn't need foreign aid, approval, or influence. Africa will build its future, and the West can do nothing to stop it.
No one can blame Africans for assuming that the rest of the world has very little interest in their continent, except maybe for extracting natural resources like gold and oil, or buying weapons and counterterrorism. Former U.S. President George W. Bush famously referred to it as a nation.
What if I told you that one of the world's poorest countries, once dismissed as a dusty footnote in West African politics, is now quietly rewriting the rules of economic transformation without a cent of foreign aid? Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation long haunted by coups, colonization, and corruption, a place many wrote off as fragile, unstable, and forgotten. But that's no longer the story. Not under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Since taking power in 2022, Traoré hasn't just challenged the status quo, he's waged a silent revolution. One rooted not in slogans or donor conferences, but in fields, factories, and fiercely guarded sovereignty. This is the story of how Traoré turned an abandoned land into a rising economic force, brick by brick, field by field, law by law. To understand Burkina Faso's present, we need to remember its recent past. By 2021, the country was spiraling. Terrorist attacks had displaced over 2 million people. Inflation choked families, schools shut down, farmers fled their land, infrastructure crumbled, and international NGOs poured in, not to build, but to manage the chaos. Burkina Faso had become what many called a managed disaster. The economy was shackled to donor money. Over 60% of the national budget came from external aid. In return, the country gave up autonomy over key decisions, from education curricula to energy policy. The West dictated, Burkina complied. But in 2022, a 34-year-old army captain changed that narrative. When Traoré seized power in a coup, critics called him reckless. But he didn't stay in the barracks. He rolled up his sleeves and went to the fields. He didn't fly to Paris or Brussels for meetings. He drove to the northern provinces to speak with farmers, displaced children, and community elders. His first decision? Cut dependency. Foreign military bases were closed. NGOs were told to either work with local leadership or leave, and the government slashed bureaucratic waste to redirect funds to internal development. One of his most radical ideas? Nationalize hope. In villages like Kaya and Dori, previously abandoned due to conflict, the government began redistributing land to youth cooperatives. Traoré's administration backed them with tools, seeds, and training, not through UN handouts, but through state-led agricultural banks funded by gold revenue. Yes, gold. The country is rich in it. For decades, foreign companies extracted billions while Burkina Faso earned cents on the dollar. Traoré renegotiated mining contracts and forced companies to hire locals, build roads, and contribute directly to regional development funds. One of the boldest moves was turning agriculture into a weapon of economic liberation. Take the case of Kombasiri. Once a dusty farming town, it's now the epicenter of Burkina's cashew revolution. Before Traoré, cashew apples, the fleshy part of the fruit, were discarded. Only the nut was exported. But in 2024, Traoré's government built a $1.5 million processing plant in the town of Pény, turning that discarded apple into juice, jam, and concentrate. The result? A 300% increase in agricultural value exports within 18 months. Farmers like Mariam Ouedraogo, once displaced and hopeless, are now employed full-time, earning enough to send their children back to school. "I used to survive, now I build," she said in an interview. And it's not just food. The cotton sector has been revitalized through local spinning mills. Burkina Faso now exports finished textiles, not just raw fiber, a game-changer in West African trade. Simultaneously, Traoré launched a quiet industrial push. With help from domestic engineers and Pan-African allies, solar energy farms began springing up in Sahel provinces. This reduced the nation's dependency on foreign electricity grids by nearly 40% within 2 years. Chinese and Russian partnerships brought affordable technology transfer, but not domination. "We choose who we deal with," said Traoré. "We are not anyone's backyard." And in Ouagadougou, young entrepreneurs now benefit from new tech hubs and small business grants, creating a nascent tech scene that once seemed impossible. Of course, this defiance didn't sit well with everyone. In 2023, Burkina Faso, alongside Mali and Niger, exited ECOWAS, the West African bloc long viewed as a proxy of Western interests. The move shocked the continent, but it also unlocked new partnerships. The three countries formed the Alliance of Sahel Sovereigns, prioritizing regional security, trade, and infrastructure without foreign strings. It wasn't just a rebellion, it was a new blueprint. Burkina Faso began trading directly with Algeria and Mauritania, opening desert trade corridors bypassing French-controlled ports. Goods that once took 3 weeks to arrive via Lome now arrive in 5 days. From abandoned land to an economic powerhouse in the making, Burkina Faso under Traoré is no miracle. It's not perfect, but it's real, it's raw, and it's undeniably rising. A country the world once pitied is now being watched with a mix of admiration and quiet alarm. Is this the model for post-colonial Africa? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Is Burkina Faso's independence strategy sustainable? Can the continent learn from this? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video so others can be part of this conversation. Stay tuned for the rise of a regional power, how Burkina Faso is reshaping West African alliances.
It is the process of revolutionizing our infrastructures that has begun. This is what led to the creation of this initiative. If over there in the West or elsewhere, in small countries without resources, they have paved departmental roads, there is no reason that in Burkina Faso we cannot pave our roads. Especially since we have all the resources locally. That's why we decided to create the initiative to move very quickly, to be able to build our roads, our highways too, and to connect our different cities.
We uncovered how Captain Ibrahim Traoré began transforming Burkina Faso from a forgotten nation into an assertive economic force without foreign aid. But the revolution wasn't just internal, it sent shockwaves across West Africa and beyond. Because Traoré didn't just rebuild Burkina Faso, he challenged the very idea of what it means to be African and sovereign in the 21st century. Now, we explore the regional fallout, shifting alliances, and the bold formation of a new Sahel power bloc that is redrawing the political map of West Africa. It started with a speech. In late 2023, Captain Traoré stood before a crowd in Ouagadougou and declared, "We will no longer be governed by decisions made in Abuja, dictated in Paris, and signed off in Washington. Burkina Faso belongs to its people." Shortly after, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger jointly announced their formal withdrawal from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. The reaction was swift and severe. ECOWAS imposed sanctions. Borders were temporarily closed, flights were suspended, financial transactions froze. But something unexpected happened. The people didn't panic, they adapted. In Bamako, in Niamey, and in Ouagadougou, a sense of solidarity replaced fear. A quiet resilience took hold, born from years of perceived betrayal by Western-aligned institutions that never truly served their interests. Traoré called it economic detox. Others called it madness. But even critics began to take notice. This wasn't collapse, it was rebirth. What followed next became one of the most significant geopolitical pivots in modern African history. In early 2024, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger launched the Alliance of Sahel States, AES for short. A pact born not of diplomacy, but of shared scars. All three nations had faced coups. All three had suffered terrorism, marginalization, and heavy foreign military presence. AES quickly went from symbolism to substance. They unified visa policies, enabling free movement of people and goods across borders. They coordinated military operations to crush jihadist strongholds in the tri-border region, with localized intelligence rather than NATO-style command. Most notably, they began harmonizing trade rules and investing in joint infrastructure. A $500 million Sahel Economic Corridor was announced, stretching from the gold fields of Mali to the cashew farms of southern Burkina to the uranium-rich desert of Niger. No Western funding, no IMF, no World Bank, just national resources and strategic partnerships with Algeria, Turkey, and Iran. For decades, Burkina Faso was a pawn in France's broader Francophone strategy. French military bases dotted the Sahel. The CFA franc pegged to the euro was a constant reminder of economic dependency. Under Traoré, the military bases are gone. The CFA franc is under review. And for the first time in over 60 years, Burkina Faso is charting its own currency path. Meanwhile, in the background, new players entered the game. China offered access to the Belt and Road Initiative, but on Burkina Faso's terms. Not just railroads and dams, but training programs for engineers and agronomists. Russia sent security consultants and wheat shipments, no lectures, no conditions. Iran offered fuel and agricultural expertise. Turkey invested in logistics and school construction. And crucially, the Burkinabe government began openly rejecting Western NGOs that could not operate transparently or respect local sovereignty. Not everyone is celebrating. Critics argue that the AES trio may be isolating themselves from the global financial system, that ditching ECOWAS could limit access to critical markets and investment. Some warn of dependency merely shifting from France to China or Russia. But supporters counter with a powerful point. For once, Burkina Faso is choosing its path. Rather than being treated as a humanitarian project, it's acting like a nation. "We'd rather eat local rice than imported politics," said one trader in Bobo Dioulasso. Indeed, Burkina Faso's local production has soared. Trade with fellow AES members now exceeds trade with France for the first time in the country's post-independence history. Inter-African commerce is up by 38%. And the people, especially the youth, are more involved in governance and economic innovation than ever before. It's not just trade and infrastructure. Traoré is leading a deeper cultural renaissance. French is no longer the sole language of instruction in many schools. Local languages, Moor, Dioula, Fulfulde, are gaining institutional respect. National museums are being restored. Traditional music and dance are promoted in urban centers. Even the school curriculum is being rewritten to reflect Burkina Faso's own heroes, not colonial generals. Traoré isn't seeking to be a global superstar. You won't find him at Davos or climate summits. But behind closed doors, he's been forging new trade corridors with Algeria, Ghana, and Egypt. And in a surprising twist, he's also rekindling ties with Guinea and Sierra Leone, non-Francophone nations that have quietly expressed admiration for Burkina Faso's self-sufficiency model. Instead of relying on colonial pathways, Burkina Faso is investing in dry ports, desert railroads, and localized manufacturing. It's not flashy, but it's working. The international press is slowly shifting from labeling Traoré a populist to calling him a strategist. Because as African countries watch what's happening in Ouagadougou, the question is no longer, will it work? It's, who's next? From revolution to regional realignment, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has turned Burkina Faso into more than just a survivor. It's becoming a leader. But what does the future hold? We'll explore the risks, the resistance, and the generational shifts happening inside the country, from rural youth movements to radical education reform, and whether this transformation can survive beyond one leader. Don't forget to comment below. Can Burkina Faso's rebellion against foreign control inspire other African nations? Or is it walking a dangerous tightrope? Like this video if you support African sovereignty. Subscribe for more bold reports on how the continent is rising in its own voice. Share this story with someone who still believes Africa is dependent. See you in the next part of this video, the next generation of power. Can the vision survive?
The culmination of a year-long process during which ECOWAS tried to avoid imminent disintegration, but all efforts were futile as Burkina Faso, the Republic of Mali, and the Republic of Niger proceeded to sever ties with ECOWAS effective from 29 January 2025.
As a result, the authority acknowledged during its summit in December, on the 15th of December 2024, that the three countries will cease to be members of ECOWAS from today, the 29th of January 2025.
What happens to a revolution when the drumbeat fades? When the parades end and the spotlight moves on? Burkina Faso is now a country reborn. But as history has shown, revolutions aren't sustained by charisma. They're carried by institutions, by education, and most importantly, by the next generation. Burkina Faso is one of the youngest countries in the world. Nearly 70% of its population is under the age of 30. For decades, this youth was silenced, trapped between failed systems and foreign dependency. But under Traoré, the silence broke. In 2023, the government launched a bold initiative called Project Koro, meaning Rise in Dioula. It was designed to do more than train workers. It aimed to build leaders. Young Burkinabe are now being enrolled in nationwide civic programs, agriculture internships, tech boot camps, and national service fellowships that combine patriotism with real-world skills. One such program, Seeds of the Nation, teaches teens how to cultivate crops, manage irrigation, and run cooperatives. It's not just about farming, it's about anchoring economic independence in the soil. In the Sahel region, where extremist groups once recruited boys with nothing to lose, local youth are now building greenhouses and exporting tomatoes to Ghana. And in the urban centers, coding academies and engineering institutes are multiplying, locally funded, locally staffed, and locally owned. Education is where real transformation either blooms or withers. And here, Traoré's government is rewriting more than books. It's rewriting identity. Gone are the French-centered colonial curricula. In their place, a new educational framework is emerging, African-centered, values-driven, and skills-focused. Students now learn not just mathematics, but economic sovereignty. Not just French literature, but local oral histories. Not just civics, but how to navigate digital economies, how to own land, how to organize a cooperative. One of the new flagship schools, École Sankara in Ouagadougou, combines traditional knowledge with modern science. It's modeled on the principle that the best solutions come from within, not abroad. As one student told reporters, "We're not learning to leave Burkina, we're learning to build it." It would be incomplete to talk about a new Burkina Faso without recognizing the role of women in this quiet revolution. Traoré's administration has opened up massive new opportunities for women in agriculture, governance, and entrepreneurship. In 2024, Mariam Zongo, a former refugee and widow, was appointed head of the National Agro-Cooperative Agency. Her cashew apple processing model, first developed in a tent camp, has now been replicated in 7 regions. Across the country, female-led businesses are receiving state microloans, tax waivers, and training. In the northern town of Gorom Gorom, a collective of women leatherworkers exported nearly $1 million in finished goods last year. And in education, girls' school enrollment has jumped by 27% since 2022, with free sanitary products and safe transport systems introduced to keep girls in class. The changes are not just economic or educational, they're deeply psychological. Burkinabe identity, once fractured by colonial legacies, terror threats, and foreign NGOs, is being rebuilt. National pride is no longer about flags or speeches. It's about ownership, participation, and visibility. On Independence Day 2024, citizens across the country planted over 2 million trees, not at the direction of government orders, but as part of a grassroots campaign called Reclaim the Soil. State-run media now airs programs on local innovators, engineers, historians, and artists. Elders tell oral stories on national radio. Proverbs, music, and folklore, once dismissed as backward, are now celebrated as the backbone of progress. In short, Burkina Faso is learning to see itself again, not as a charity case, but as a creator of its own destiny. And yet, for all the progress, dangers remain. Terrorist attacks haven't vanished. Global economic pressures, rising debt in neighboring countries, and political instability across West Africa still cast a shadow. Western media continues to portray Traoré with suspicion, labeling him anti-democratic or authoritarian with popular support. And even inside the country, some civil society groups warn about centralized power and lack of clear succession plans. The fear remains. What happens if Traoré is gone? Will the system hold? His supporters say yes. They point to decentralized cooperatives, regional leadership councils, and empowered youth networks as proof that this revolution no longer rests on one man. But the truth, only time will tell. In one of his rare international interviews, Traoré said this:
"We are not asking for applause. We are asking to be left to stand. We are learning, failing, and building. That is sovereignty."
That message wasn't just for Burkina Faso. It was for the entire continent. Because what Traoré has shown, whether you support him or not, is that African development does not need to come from Paris, Washington, or Brussels. It can come from Ouagadougou, from the soil, from the people. So what do you think? Is this the dawn of a new African model, or a dangerous experiment in isolation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Is Traoré's vision sustainable? Can a nation truly thrive without foreign aid? What lessons should other African leaders take from Burkina Faso? Be part of this conversation by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. The world needs to hear what's happening in Africa, not through the usual lens of poverty or chaos, but through the lens of courage and creativity. This has been our deep dive into Traoré's Burkina Faso, from abandoned land to economic powerhouse. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stand tall, think boldly, and stay informed.